We can no longer allow a white nationalist to be in the White House.
Is the president a white supremacist?
He is. He's also made that very clear. He's dehumanized or sought to dehumanize those who do not look like or pray like the majority here in this country.
Congressman Beto O'Rourke told me this morning that he believes President Trump is a white supremacist or a white nationalist. Do you agree?
I do.
Do you think that President Trump is a white supremacist?
I do.
2020 Democrats going all in on calling President Trump a white supremacist. And don't get me wrong, the president's language indefensible, but many people wondering whether or not the Democrats' approach could actually backfire with voters. Also, since the last debate, we have seen a lot of change in the numbers. Joe Biden, he's still on top with 32% support, but Liz Warren, she has surged, and now she's above 20% nationally for the first time. Bernie Sanders, he's the only other candidate in double digits, and he's going in the wrong direction. Kamala Harris, she's also plunged after a lackluster debate performance. Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, Cory Booker, they're clinging to single-digit poll numbers. Now, earlier today, Andrew spoke with Democratic strategist Roger Fisk. He's a former campaign advisor to Barack Obama.
Roger, Joe Biden has gotten a boost in the polls since the second debate, where he gave a better performance, but one that was hardly game-changing. Why the increase? Did Biden do so well, or did others do so poorly?
First off, thanks so much for having me, Andrew. I think what Biden was able to do is he stabilized, right? That's what you need to do as a front runner. He's not probably going to grow all that much. So what he needs to do is sustain, maintain, and in that case, after the stumbles of the first debate, stabilize and stop the bleeding. And I think he effectively pretty much did that.
Why do Democratic voters seem so willing to give Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt? They're giving him every opportunity to prove himself again, whether it's a poor debate performance or a gaffe or something else. Why?
I think part of that comes from the longevity of the relationship. He was in the Senate from 1972 up through 2009. And so when people have decades of knowledge of people, almost in a way, and this is one of the few times I'll ever make comparisons between the president and the former vice president. But a lot of the cushion that Trump gets is from people saying, well, then that's kind of Trump being Trump. And I think in a way it fits a pattern. It doesn't have any malice to it, I don't think. But people look at Biden and he stumbles every once in a while, and they say that's Joe being Joe.
The other big winner in the post-debate polls was clearly Elizabeth Warren. She certainly got more momentum than Bernie Sanders, who everybody seems to think they're in the same lane. I'm curious, why is she doing so well, not just after this debate, but for the past couple of months she's been on an upward trajectory. What has she shown Democratic voters so far?
Well, I think what's really interesting there is that her growth has been relatively slow and steady, and that's exactly what you want to do. I always think of these things as like if you're putting together a dinner party and you know you're going to need boiling water at some point. What I always do is I just put a big pot of water on the stove and I put it on a low flame, knowing that in an hour or two, when I need it, I can just tweak it up that little bit. And I say that because what you want to make sure that you're not either peaking too early. For example, having all the components of your campaigns in Iowa and New Hampshire kind of hitting all cylinders, around Halloween, for example, and then burning all the gas that's in your tank. So when I look at the way she's growing, there's been a lot of recent reports about the strength of her ground operation in Nevada, which I think can only be a reflection of the strength of her Iowa operation, that it's slow, incremental growth. I think they're doing it very patiently. And I also think that they're almost kind of consciously dialing back so that they don't bring her situation to a full boil and peak too early.
Just don't watch that pot while you're waiting for the water to boil, Roger. Warren is one of the Democrats. Just Democrat after Democratic candidate have been saying point blank Donald Trump is a white nationalist. That is an awfully big statement, one that may not sit well with voters, especially in the general election. How will voters respond, and how will primary voters respond?
Well, obviously, it's going to play a little bit better in the primary because you're dealing with a more progressive constituency that shows up in the caucuses and in New Hampshire and things like that. I've said all along, and I'm no fan or cheerleader of the current occupant of the White House, but I've said all along that anyone running has to start with a blank piece of paper. They need to lay out exactly what their agenda is, and how they intend to get there. And by that I mean kind of the legislative underpinnings of their vision for infrastructure, healthcare, transportation, foreign affairs, etc. And I say that because President Trump's either stumbles or strengths or weaknesses can't be part of someone's vision or agenda. And neither can they go lunging in dramatic directions just based on the news cycles and based on the president's most recent stumbles or gaffes or anything else. So anyone who's out there thinking that the president is going to stumble his way into a Democratic victory is wrong, and they still need to go back and make the essential case for who they are, where they want to take the country, and how they want to get there.
Roger, you worked for John Kerry's campaign in 2004, which featured one of the all-time most effective dirty tricks, the Swift boat ad. Kerry was widely seen as not responding forcefully enough. It's just about a mortal lock that Trump and his backers are going to do the same thing to whoever the 2020 Democratic nominee is. How should the nominee respond? And what's the line between giving as good as you get and going too far? Does the nominee have to be someone who can trade punches with Trump more effectively than Kerry did with Bush in 2004?
Sure. It's a very, very interesting question. Frankly, I think we can all agree that the Democrats could nominate Bull Connor and Father Coughlin, and the current occupant of the White House is still going to label them as socialist and left-wing and everything else. I mean, I don't think there's a person right-wing enough that he's not going to just assign that label to. So we have to kind of walk into it expecting that that's going to happen. You know, but one of the interesting lenses on this for me is you know, as you mentioned, I grew up working for John Kerry, but then I spent 12 years working for Senator and President Obama and watching how he navigated 2007 and 2008. You definitely want to be aware of and prepared to respond, but what you can't do is respond every single day, because every sentence that comes out of your mouth, if it's not advancing your vision and your message, your agenda, then you're not maximizing your time in that state, in that room, in that TV studio, in that debate, etc. So a winning candidate has to be extremely strategic and surgical about exactly what they say, when, and when they punch back. That said, there's a lot you can do with surrogates and validators and things like that that can be part of that response, so that you can have some elected official that's affiliated with your campaign go out there and take the more gratuitous swings in your defense, while the candidate alone continues to focus on their agenda. And that's the way I would suggest people look at this.
Roger Fisk is a Democratic strategist. Roger, thanks for a few minutes. Have a great weekend.
Thanks a ton, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Now, speaking of the elections, this much hopefully Republicans and Democrats can agree on. Election security is still an open-ended question. In fact, our experts in the intelligence community say not only did the Russians do it, are doing it, but they will impact our elections, or at least try to, next year. So what to do about it? Even Republicans are going after the president. We'll speak to an election security expert right after this break.